My daughter called me on a Tuesday morning and said it would be better if I stayed home from the gala. Dad, it's going to be all business talk. Lance has investors coming from Chicago. You'd be bored stiff, honestly. So I stayed home. 5 days later, I sat in my kitchen in Crawfordsville, Indiana, watching my son-in-law stand at a ballroom podium in front of 400 people and announce, with a spotlight and a projection screen and a microphone that carried his voice to every corner of that room, that Harborline Realty was donating a residential property on Millbrook Lane to the evening's silent auction. The address on the screen behind him was 414 Millbrook Lane. That was my address. I had lived there for 29 years. I poured myself a second cup of coffee, settled back into my chair, and waited for the part I already knew was coming. You're watching Daddy's Revenge Stories, and I'm glad you chose to be here tonight. Before we get into it, drop a comment and let me know what city or state you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this one travels. And one thing I want to say up front, this story includes some dramatized details added for the telling of it. The heart of it is true. The lesson is real. Everything else, consider it the way you'd consider any family story passed around a kitchen table. It gets a little bigger every time. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Herbert Connelly. Herb to anyone who's known me more than 20 minutes. I'm 64 years old, and I spent 31 years running an HVAC company out of a converted garage on the east side of Crawfordsville. Not a glamorous line of work. Your hands are never entirely clean, no matter how long you scrub them. And in Indiana, that means about 7 months of cold that gets into your joints and stays there. But the business was mine, built from nothing, and when I sold it 3 years ago to a young couple with good instincts and the energy I no longer had, I walked away with enough to live quietly and without worry. That's the only kind of wealthy that ever interested me. I live in the same house I bought with my late wife Jean in 1995. Corner lot on Millbrook Lane, covered porch that faces east, so you get the morning sun. A backyard Jean turned into something worth looking at before she passed 4 years ago from a cancer that moved faster than any of us had words for. I haven't changed much about the yard. The roses she planted along the south-facing fence still come back every April, same as always, stubborn in exactly the way she was. Some things about a person transfer into the things they tended. You don't disturb them. My daughter Georgia grew up in that house. She has a bedroom on the second floor that still has glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling from when she was 9, because I never brought myself to scrape them off. She graduated from Indiana State, moved to Indianapolis, met a man named Lance at some networking event for commercial real estate, and married him 18 months later in a ceremony that cost more than I cleared my first 3 years in business. I told Jean I thought they were moving fast. Jean told me that wasn't mine to decide. She was right about most things, and she was right about that. I want to be fair about Lance, because fairness matters to me even when it's inconvenient. He was never openly unkind. He shook my hand at every holiday with the firm, brisk grip of someone who had been coached on first impressions. He called me sir, which sounds like respect until you hear the particular flatness underneath it, the register of a man addressing someone he has already categorized and filed. He asked about my work with the careful curiosity of someone who found the subject mildly distasteful, but was too polished to let it show. I ran an HVAC company for 3 decades. Lance developed mixed-use commercial properties in the suburbs of Indianapolis. In his accounting of the world, those two things did not belong in the same sentence. Georgia had changed too in the years of her marriage, not all at once, and not in any single way I could point to. But something had shifted between us, the ordinary texture of the relationship, the small things. She called less often. When she did call, the conversations had a quality of efficiency to them, like she was checking an item off a list. She stopped telling me the ordinary things, what she cooked for dinner, what made her laugh that week, what she was worrying about. The ordinary things are the connective tissue of a relationship. You don't notice their absence until you reach for them one day and find nothing there. My neighbor Irene noticed before I let myself. Irene is 71 years old, has lived next door since before Georgia was born, and has the particular sharpness of a woman who has watched a great deal of life from a kitchen window and knows what she's looking at. She brought food with regularity, a casserole, a batch of corn muffins, a pie from the bakery on Main Street, and she had a way of saying the things she was actually thinking that I have always found rare and valuable. Your son-in-law is planning something, she told me one evening in late September, sitting on my back porch with a glass of iced tea. I can't tell you what yet, but a man doesn't look at another man's house the way he looks at yours without having a purpose for it. I had noticed it too. Lance had commented on the property more often lately, the lot size, the location 2 blocks from the revitalized downtown corridor, the fact that corner lots in my neighborhood were moving at a premium. He said these things the way you'd make observations about the weather. but I'd spent 30 years reading the difference between what customers said and what they meant. And I knew the difference between idle conversation and appraisal. Then came the call about the Gala, a charity fundraiser for a children's hospital in Indianapolis, hosted by Lance's firm, 400 guests, black tie. Georgia called on a Tuesday morning and explained it would be better if I sat this one out. You'd be bored, Dad. It's all industry talk. Lance needs the night to go smoothly. I told her I understood. I meant it differently than she heard it. Irene appeared at my back door before the morning was over, with half a coffee cake and something she needed to say. Last Thursday, she told me, Lance drove out here while you were at your doctor's appointment. I watched from my kitchen. He walked your property line. He had one of those laser measuring tools. She pulled a small notepad from her cardigan pocket. Irene was exactly the kind of person who kept a notepad and showed me. Thursday, October 9th, 11:14 a.m. I wrote it down because something told me to. I had told Georgia about that appointment the week before. Someone had known I would be out of the house. I thanked Irene for the coffee cake and told her I would handle it. That afternoon, I found my daughter's tablet on the kitchen counter. She had left it during her last visit 3 weeks before, in the rush of leaving after Lance had called twice during dinner, and each time Georgia had gotten a little quieter, I had meant to mail it back. I picked it up to put it in a padded envelope, and the screen came on. Her email was open. The thread at the top of the inbox was from LanceHarberlinRealty.com. Subject line, re Connelly property, timeline. I want to be clear about what I did. I did not search through her inbox. I did not go looking for anything. The screen was on, and the thread was visible without a single click. I stood at the kitchen counter for a long moment. Then I sat down and read it. 11 messages. Lance and someone he referred to as his title contact were discussing a quitclaim deed, a legal instrument in Indiana that transfers real property from one party to another. Legitimate tool, commonly used in family estate transfers. Also, as Lance's contact explained in one message, relatively straightforward to execute if you could get the grantor's signature on the right form. The deed, once recorded with the Montgomery County Recorder's Office, would transfer my house to a Delaware LLC Lance had registered the previous spring. Then there was a message from Georgia. She had written, "He still thinks the form is for estate planning. I told him it would protect the property. He asked if he should get his own lawyer, and I said it was standard. Is that okay?" Lance had replied, "It's fine, he trusts you. Don't overthink it." I read the thread twice. Then I set the tablet down, took my phone off the counter, and photographed every message in the thread. After that, I placed the tablet carefully in a padded envelope, wrote Georgia's address on the front in my best handwriting, and set it by the door for tomorrow's mail. I called a man named Cyrus that evening. We had met through the Rotary Club 20 years back, when he was winding down a 30-year career in real estate and estate law. He answered on the second ring, the way men who have been around long enough to understand urgency tend to answer calls from old friends late in the day. "Herb," he said, "you sound like a man who's found something he wasn't expecting." I told him what I had found. He was quiet for a moment, then, "Come see me tomorrow at 8. Don't bring the tablet, just yourself and whatever property documents you have." Cyrus's office was a converted Victorian 3 blocks off the square that he had owned since 1989. The books were the same ones I had seen there for 2 decades. The coffee was genuinely terrible, and the man himself looked exactly as he always had, compact, precise, with a way of listening that made you feel like every word you said was being filed somewhere useful. He explained the situation the way he explained everything, patient and direct, as though the clarity of the information was itself a form of respect. "What Lance is attempting," he said, "is a fraudulent property transfer. A quitclaim deed requires a notarized signature from the property owner, that's you. If he obtained Georgia's cooperation in misrepresenting what the form was, or if he intends to forge your signature outright, either path constitutes real estate fraud. In Indiana, that's a level 5 felony. The more relevant question for you right now is what we do before he does it." "What do we do?" I said. "Today, we file a deed restriction and record a revocable living trust that places this property and your primary accounts in a protected legal structure. Once that trust instrument is on file with the county recorder, any subsequent deed purporting to transfer the property, even one bearing your forged signature, will be flagged during title review. No legitimate title company closes over a recorded trust. If Lance proceeds anyway, the fraud becomes self-documenting." He looked at me steadily. "What we're doing today isn't about punishing anyone, Herb. It's about building a wall. What happens on the other side of that wall is their decision." We spent 4 hours in his office. By noon, I had a new will, a recorded revocable trust naming the Crawfordsville Children's Foundation as the charitable remainder beneficiary, and a formal written record of the email thread I had photographed, dated and notarized. On Cyrus's advice, I also filed a report with the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, not because I wanted Lance arrested at that moment, but because establishing the record mattered if things progressed. Cyrus walked me to my truck when we were done. He shook my hand the way he always did with both of his. "You did the right thing coming here before it happened," he said. "Most people come after." 2 days later, Georgia called to say she was coming on Saturday. She brought a bag of apples, a jar of local honey, and a peach pie from a bakery in Broad Ripple that she said I would love. She was right. It was excellent. We sat at the kitchen table and talked the way we used to. She asked about my cardiologist appointment. I asked about her work, and for half an hour it felt like a version of us that had been missing for longer than I wanted to calculate. Then she reached into the canvas bag and produced a manila envelope. She set it on the table between us, with the particular careful casualness of someone who has rehearsed the gesture considerably. "Lance put together some paperwork," she said. Her voice had shifted registers. The warmth of the previous 30 minutes exchanged for something practiced. "It's just a property management agreement. It would let him help handle things with the house if you ever needed. Taxes, routine maintenance, just to make things easier." I looked at the envelope. I looked at my daughter's face, which was working to hold 3 expressions simultaneously and not quite managing any of them. "Can I keep it to look over?" I said. Something moved behind her eyes. "Of course, no rush at all." She left 2 hours later. We embraced at the door and she said she'd call soon. When her car reached the corner of Millbrook and turned out of sight, I carried the envelope to the back porch and left it on the table untouched. The October evening was coming in cool and quiet. The zinnias Jean had planted along the fence finally giving out, the oak in the corner putting down the first serious layer of leaves. Irene appeared at the gate. She had a thermos and 2 cups, and the look of a woman who had already understood the shape of the day. We sat without talking for a while in the particular way of people who have been through enough together that silence requires no maintenance. After a while she said, "You're going to be all right, aren't you?" "I think so," I said. "I've been getting things in order." She nodded once and didn't ask me to elaborate. That was Irene. Before I tell you what happened at that gala, I want you to drop a comment below. Type 999 or just still here so I know you're with me. And I'll tell you now, the following events include some details dramatized for the telling. The shape of it, what happened in that ballroom, what it meant, all of it is real. All right, here we go. The gala was a Friday. Georgia texted me that afternoon. "Big night for Lance. Fingers crossed." I replied that I hoped it went well. That was the last message I received from her before 9:15 that evening. I had the event's live stream open on my laptop by 7:30. Lance's firm had contracted a production company to broadcast it. The hospital had wanted transparency in the fundraising, and the corporate sponsors liked the visibility. The camera work was professional. The ballroom at the Crown Plaza looked like rooms designed to make people forget how much they were spending. Chandeliers, white linens, the low controlled light of an event where the cost of everything has been calculated to suggest a number slightly higher than what it actually is. I watched the cocktail hour. I watched Lance move through it the way he was built to move through rooms like that, table to table, laughing at the exact right moments, projecting the particular ease of a man who had learned that the appearance of success and success itself were, for most social purposes, functionally the same thing. He was good at it. I will not take that from him. The silent auction segment began at 8:40. Lance took the stage to a round of applause that was warm in the way of audiences who have already been fed and watered and are prepared to be generous. He thanked the sponsors. He thanked the hospital. He spoke for several minutes about community investment and long-term value and Harborline Realty's commitment to the region, and he was again very good at it. People leaned forward. The room was with him. Then he said, "Tonight, Harborline Realty is proud to make our largest single donation to this auction, a fully transferred residential property in the heart of Crawfordsville, a corner lot in a revitalizing corridor, primed for redevelopment, and offered tonight to benefit the children of this community." The projection screen lit up behind him. It was a photograph of my house. The address in the lower corner of the slide was 414 Millbrook Lane. My house. The house Jean had chosen. The house where George's glow-in-the-dark star still dotted the ceiling of her old room. I sat very still at my kitchen table. On the laptop screen, 400 people applauded. I picked up my coffee cup. It had gone cold. I drank it anyway. 20 minutes later, the camera near the ballroom's east entrance caught something the production team had not planned for. Two men in gray suits came through the side door. They did not move with the drift of late arrivals. They moved with the specific, purposeful directness of people who knew exactly where they were going and had no social interest in pretending otherwise. They crossed the room to the stage. Lance was mid-sentence when he registered them. I saw it. The fractional hesitation, invisible to anyone not watching for it, the kind that comes from 30 years of reading the difference between a service call going normally and one that has just changed character. One of the men stepped close and said something. Lance turned to face him fully, which meant turning away from the microphone, which meant 400 people in that room, and however many watching the stream saw my son-in-law receive information in public silence. His face did something I have thought about a number of times since. It was not shame, exactly. It was the expression of a man watching a calculation fail so completely and so publicly that no available response exists. Not anger, not tears, not the smooth recovery he would have managed in any other room. Just the total suspension of the performance. The thing underneath it, unguarded for the first time, smaller than the performance had ever suggested. He stepped back from the microphone. The room collapsed by degrees, the way a stadium wave runs in reverse. The people nearest the stage understanding first, the comprehension spreading outward, until 400 people in evening wear were standing and talking and holding up phones. The live stream's viewer count, which I could see in the corner of my screen, jumped from several hundred to something approaching 2,000 in under 3 minutes. I reached over and turned down the volume. I sat in the kitchen of the house at 414 Millbrook Lane in the October quiet, with the refrigerator humming and a car passing on the street outside, and felt something in my chest release that had been braced for a very long time. My phone rang at 9:15 Georgia. I answered on the second ring. She didn't say hello. She said, "Dad," just that, my name alone, and then silence, and in the silence I heard more than the word itself. Grief, guilt, something that had been held together by effort finally letting go. "I'm here," I said. "I didn't know what it was," she said. Her voice was the one I remembered from her childhood, stripped of everything acquired. I knew there was paperwork. I knew Lance wanted to do something with the house. He said it was protection. He said it would help you. I didn't ask the questions I should have asked because... She stopped. Because I didn't want to know the answers. I sat with that. It was honest, and honesty, even the painful kind, was worth sitting with. "Georgia," I said, "when you brought me those papers, did you know what they were for?" A silence, long enough. "He told me it was a management easement," she said. "He said you'd still own it." I told myself that was probably right. Her voice dropped. "I was wrong to do that." "You were," I said, "and I need you to know I understand why you did it. That doesn't make it all right, but I understand it." She asked me how I had known. I told her about the tablet she'd left on my counter, the email thread visible on the open screen, the photographs I'd taken with my phone. I told her about Cyrus, the recorded trust, the county filings. I told her about Irene watching Lance measure my garage with a laser tool on a Thursday morning in October while I was at my cardiologist appointment. There was a long pause. "He said you'd never figure it out," she said quietly. I thought about 31 years of reading service contracts before I signed them, of customers who tried to change terms after we'd shaken hands, of the particular skill that comes from working with your hands for a living, not the glamour kind of intelligence, but the kind that is made from paying attention to the specific weight of things. I had good reasons to be careful, I said. We talked for another 40 minutes, not about Lance, about us, about the things that had not been said between us for years, the ordinary things I had stopped reaching for, because reaching and finding nothing is its own kind of education. It was a conversation I had wanted to have for a long time, and I had not expected it to come at me like this, on a Friday evening with cold coffee and a laptop screen. She said she would call tomorrow. She did. Lance was charged with attempted real estate fraud and forgery of a legal instrument. Both are felonies in Indiana. His attorney entered a not guilty plea. Cyrus told me the proceedings would take time and that the outcome belonged to the courts, not to me. I told him I understood that. I meant it. Georgia moved out of their place in Indianapolis in November. She found an apartment in Broad Ripple and started talking to someone, a therapist, which I consider among the better decisions she has made in years. We have dinner on the phone every Sunday now. Actual conversations, not task completions. She told me last month that she still carries the image of those glow-in-the-dark stars in her memory, the way you carry a house with you even after you've left it. She said she was sorry she hadn't trusted me more. I told her I was sorry I hadn't said more of what I had noticed earlier when it might have made a difference. We are both learning something about what it costs to say nothing. Irene came over the morning after the gala with scrambled eggs and the expression of a woman who had already read the news. We sat at the kitchen table and ate the eggs and drank coffee and looked out at the backyard going quiet in the way it does every fall. The zinnias given up, the oak nearly bare, the yard doing what it has done every October for 29 years, regardless of anything happening inside the house. "Is she going to be all right?" Irene asked. She meant Georgia. "She is," I said. "She has work to do, but she will be." Irene nodded and said nothing else about it. Some things are large enough that the most honest thing you can do is leave space around them. Jean's roses came back in April, the way they always do. Irene brought lemon cake the morning the first blooms opened, and we stood in the yard and looked at them the way you stand in front of something that has survived something, and decided simply to continue. I have been thinking about what I would tell someone in the position I was in, the father watching the distance grow, wanting to believe it was a phase, telling himself that patience was the same thing as wisdom. I was wrong about that for longer than I want to admit. Patience is a virtue, but patience aimed at the wrong thing becomes a way of not looking at what's right in front of you. I spent years not looking, because looking would have cost me the story I was still trying to hold. The truth is this: the people who love you do not need you to make yourself smaller to fit their plans. They do not need to measure your house when you are out. If someone is doing those things, your patience is not preserving anything. It is only delaying the reckoning that was always coming. Some reckonings, I have learned, are not punishments. They are just the truth, arriving on its own schedule. And the paperwork, whatever you do, get the paperwork in order first. If this story found you at the right time, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe to Daddy's Revenge Stories. I'll be here, and I am grateful every time that you are too.